Hormones, gut health, GLP-1s, peptides, and fueling female athletes. Dasha Fitness joins Coach U to separate nutrition science from the noise. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Coach U podcast. Today we're being joined by dietitian Dasha, and she can be found on social media at Dasha Fitness. Dasha, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I want to talk about your fitness journey and your in training and how you developed into a registered dietitian.
I used to be a dancer for 12 years growing up. I tried every sport there was out there. But when I went to college, I essentially lost all of that in the sense that I wasn't going to commit to a club team in college. I was definitely not going to be I was not being recruited for any athletics by any means. And I didn't have dance anymore as a movement outlet for myself. And I had to find something new. And so I started going to the gym and I started getting into bodybuilding and fitness. And I was on the track to become a doctor or a researcher, nutrition researcher. So a lot of my up to that point, and I had been very active in high school. I was doing internships at Princeton University, at Mass General. I was doing internships every single type of research that you can possibly think of, I was involved with. I thought this was going to be my path. I learned, as most do, that, it's very much a test and pill approach. And as I was falling in love with fitness, what I learned and what I started observing was there are only two things that we really have control over that the doctors can't help us with. And that's our diet, our exercise, and maybe some supplementation that, the doctors don't really tell you about. And so I became absolutely obsessed and fascinated with the research around optimizing both of those. So I helped write a lot of nutrition, New York Times bestselling books, and I essentially dug into the macro and micronutrient biochemistry on how we digest food, how we absorb certain vitamins and minerals, and what are the processes. And then I also did a lot of research on paleo diets and Paleolithic eras, where I watched and studied how our bodies morphed over the years, how our brains got bigger, how our stomachs changed, how our legs changed, and how that played a role in evolution and in dietary changes and shifts that we saw, the creation of fire, how that shifted our physiology, and then how that changed our movement patterns, right? And so a lot of that with the exercise and the diet research, that's kind of a lot of what I became very fascinated in. And when I went to get my master's in nutrition data science, they now call it, I applied to do a dual MS and RD path so that I could practice what I had started kind of researching. In undergrad, this is when Instagram first launched. So you were posting your one carb protein pancake kind of thing. That was when I entered into the fitness scene. And so I had grown a large following. I was doing basic macro and nutrition coaching and exercise coaching. But once I became a registered dietitian, that allowed me to start practicing medical nutrition therapy. And so that's kind of the transition and shift that happened. During that same time, I was going through my own health journey, specifically with gut health. I was getting diagnosed with celiac disease, and it took them 2 to 3 years at that point because it wasn't very well known or established. And so my doctor had ordered blood work, and he was like, it's half negative, half positive. I was like, that can't be possible. Then he was like, you get the scans done or the scopes done. And he was like, it's half positive, half negative. I was like, sir, let me take this into my own hands because I don't understand how you can tell me that something is half negative, half positive. So
Yeah.
all of that got me into my own health optimization, gut health journey. And so that's a lot of what I practice and preach today.
What for you has been the most empowering piece of that to help others?
By now, and also through my clinical work as a registered dietitian, I know the order of operations. So I know that if you present with these symptoms, the doctor will do this testing, and then this is your kind of journey and path. And so the advantage that gives me is I can say, hey, this is what's going to happen if you say this. This is what's going to happen if you say this. And these are your other options if you decide that these aren't the alternatives. And so, what I like to do whenever someone comes in for either a consult with me or for coaching with us is I say, hey, I want you to be in full control of your health journey.
Mm.
These are the 5 different paths that you can take. These are the risks involved, the costs involved, the outcomes that you're most likely to get. And you
Nice.
decide now what you want to do, because I think that's what I wish I had when I was going through my health journey. And I always like to tell people too, because some people, it's a quick fix. I feel like we try A, B,
Yep.
C, they respond to A, B, C, they're good to go. And some people have to get to K, J, L, M order of operations before we get to that test or that prescription that works for them. And by prescription, I don't necessarily mean pharmaceuticals. I just mean whatever the solution may be or the test may be.
Yeah. And it's so individual too. And I think we lose sight of that, that everyone's contextual.
Mhm. Yeah. And I always like to say, like, think of the alphabet, like we are just going down that order of operations. Just because ABCD didn't work for you doesn't mean that F won't. And so
Right.
and it's not like we can jump to F without trying ABCD. So we have to go systematically through the alphabet kind of thing of the order of
Mhm.
operations. But just because it takes you a little bit longer doesn't mean that you're broken or you're off. It just means that the majority of the people experience benefits from these kinds of things. If you need to go a little
Right.
step further, then that's just totally fine.
It just goes back to people very much needing to know themselves too. And like you need help along the way. You definitely need help, and having professional help is probably the best thing you can do. And so, but having that understanding of like everyone's individual, I think it's in the training side too, it's like I get that 100%. I wanted to ask you about your lessons from your competition phase of training. What are some of the things you would do differently, or maybe give yourself advice of how you would do things differently if you were talking to that person? And then also, how would you help those interested in competing now, because it's still a huge field, but I feel like we've come so far in terms of just the understanding of nutrition, and you've definitely learned along the way. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, and I think that there are so many other modalities now that can actually
Mm.
benefit the body and help with a lot of preservation in our hormone
What are some
health
of
and things
those?
like those. What I'm leaning more towards is even the whole refeed should happen twice, like 2 back-to-back days should be a refeed for your hormone health, whereas males only need
Mm,
1 refeed day. Like small things like that came
interesting.
out in the research that female hormone research is just starting to really come out in the past 5 years, I would say.
Okay, so from that, why is that so important for women to understand?
Because majority of people who contest prepped, and I haven't coached in contest prep in a while, but majority of people who do harsh and fast end up with an autoimmune condition. And now I think there's a lot more safety barriers that we can put up and prevent any sort of very extreme systemic stress from happening. I don't think that it's 100% there. I don't think that it's safe at all. In fact, I would say if you're looking for something that's healthy, do not get into bodybuilding at all. But I do think that there are safer ways at this point. And you can think of it almost like, wrestlers who have to hit weight before they get in. Like a lot of dangerous things happen there. Of course,
Yeah,
they're a lot
yeah.
safer now than they were, but it doesn't mean it's not extremely unhealthy to do. We could get into a tangent of like REDS with relative energy deficiency in women and how prevalent that is. And I think more than anything, it's just a matter of making sure that you're recovering properly as an athlete. No matter what sport you play, it's eating enough.
That you just brought up another like 7 million thoughts for me on this, because that as an athlete and just, uh, wrestling is one sport for sure.
Mhm.
Bodybuilding in itself is a sport, and it takes so much commitment and time. And I think for you to do it, you really, really need to love it. It doesn't mean don't do it, right? Like I think you have,
Right.
but at the same time, like, I
Same
could
with
say
any
that about
sport,
any
though.
sport. I was just about to say,
Yeah.
for any sport, I could say, like, "Hey, you might football." I mean,
Yeah.
CTE, we're talking, like, elbows in baseball. What are you willing to sacrifice for doing something that you love? Because I feel like you don't know what's going on inside from, the stress that your body's going through in order to make your external figure look a certain way. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I completely agree that I think there are more dangers in bodybuilding than there are in a lot of sports like baseball, because in baseball, it's a performance game. In
Hmm.
bodybuilding, it's not a performance game, it's a physique game. And your physique and your performance are very different markers of stress, resiliency, and internal health.
This is where it always gets tricky and everyone's contextual. Eating enough of the right stuff, eating enough, protein, is it eating enough carbs? Everyone's different. Totally, totally get that. But what are some foundational principles you have for that?
You're absolutely right. It completely depends, and it depends on your seasons and your training, because I, growing up, had a friend who was a Penn State football player, and he had to be eating 10,000 calories a day. You're
Mm,
absolutely insane if you think that he's gonna do that through Whole Foods, right? And that is a
right.
systemic stressor on the system. He has to eat 10K, like, that's a lot of calories for the body to have to process in a day.
Yeah.
That's a huge stressor in itself. However, if his physical demand in football camp and in football training when he's out hot, sweating in the sun, like, his body also needs that. And so it's kind of that balance game of whole foods first and not really being afraid of the processed foods if they're going to be beneficial for your digestive system and for your gut. And that's where like things like osmolality may matter, or carbohydrate type versus just carbohydrate quantity, things
Mm.
like that we can manipulate.
Let's talk about hormones. I do want you to explain hormones like I'm five. So tell me what hormones are, why they're so important, and how our nutrition can affect them.
Whenever I teach hormones, I actually start with the gut. However, for this purpose, nutrition needs to happen in order for these systems to function. So, hormones happen as a result of a signal that comes into our body or in our system. A lot of the time, that's food, right? Because our organs and our thyroid, they need vitamins in order to work. So, we're not just what we eat, we are what we absorb. And so, we can talk about that in a second. But hormones themselves are just signals in the body, and they can be blood sugar signals. They can be satiety signals to tell you when you're full or when you're hungry. They could be sex hormones. They could be hormones that are related to our adrenal glands, our thyroid glands. There are a lot of different hormones in the body. And I think the most important ones that we see on a day to day basis are probably the sex hormones, the ones that people speak most about. The most popular: testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, DHEAS, pregnenolone, and they're all related and very, very directionally impacted by cholesterol, by cortisol, and stress markers, just like anything. And so, what I actually teach at Core Perform and with our clients and with our coaches that we mentor is that there are 5 things that will affect anything in your body. And those 5 things are always going to be stress, because stress in
Mm.
these 5 facets are what can change your epigenetics and turn on certain genes, turn off certain genes, turn on certain signals, turn off certain signals. So, all chronic disease can be either impacted and increased or decreased by these 5 factors. And those 5 factors are called the speed pillars. So you can remember them like speed up your health, speed up your metabolism. So those are sleep, personal stress, environmental stress, exercise, and diet. And when you have too much or too little of any of these things, the body becomes unstable. So when we have too much exercise, that is a stressor on the system. Just like I told you, too much calories is just as stressful in the system as too little calories. It's a physical demand beyond our normal maintenance pattern. So that should help you kind of regulate and find, hey, if I want to improve my gut health and or improve my hormone health or improve any marker of my health, these are the 5 foundations that I need to focus on. And what is the elephant in the room? Am I getting the 7 to 8 hours of sleep? Am I able to have resiliency towards my stress, or am I moody? Am I snapping at everyone? Do I
Mm.
feel like, everyone around me is making me a little volatile? Because the reality is, we all have kids, we all have work, we all have stressors in our day to day, and we are not our stressors. It's not the personal stressors that we can get rid of. We can't get rid of anything else, but we can change how our bodies subconsciously respond to them. And so personal stress is a big one. Environmental stress is things like mold, air quality, water quality, also the air you breathe, allergies, California forest fires increase the amount of toxins that our bodies are exposed to. You just got a new pair of clothes, you just bought a new rug in your house or a new mattress, and all of those VOCs are being released into the air. Hopefully you have an air purifier set up to help manage that. I think the biggest thing that I see for women on the exercise and diet is, I like to say, around 4 times a week resistance training, 3 to 4 times a week resistance training is like all you really need.
Yep.
And diet, you should definitely be eating more than 1,800 calories. Like, majority of my clients are eating 2,300 calories plus, because once you optimize your gut and your hormones, your body is able to metabolize a lot more and a lot better because your thyroid is optimized. These are your
Mhm.
actual metabolic hormones, and there are ways to optimize them.
I actually love that you brought that up, just the amount of calories that are being eaten for women and it being a thing that the under eating has been there for so many years now. But
Mhm.
um, talk to me about the dangers of under eating, and then talk to me about how someone can work their way up to, again, contextually speaking, we understand that, but just, maybe some steps that they could take towards getting themselves to eat the right amount of calories.
If you ever are curious and looking further into this, you can look up the parasympathetic system and the sympathetic system. And these are nervous system responses, which are basically fight or flight or rest and digest. And if you look at the number of physiological consequences of staying in fight or flight, you will be shocked. But some
Mm,
of them you're already probably feeling or have felt in the past. Things like low energy, brain fog, memory loss. And this is just an acute state. When we drag this on long term, we're talking bone deterioration, we're talking dementia risk, we're talking a lot of our skeletal system and a lot of those long term health markers where you're really just decreasing your lifespan. And I think that is something that people don't acutely see because they're like, I can get through the fatigue. And it's like, well, can you get through the hip replacement surgery you're going to need at 35 because your bones are so weak?
how does
Yeah.
somebody work their way up to it though? How does somebody find the right steps to kind of, getting their rhythm down?
This is what a lot of people come to us for because it is so difficult. One, it's scary, but also part of being in a state of stress is shutting down your digestive processes. So you might feel like you're burping, you're bloated a lot more. And it actually becomes this double edged sword where it's like, I know I want to be eating more, but I just feel so sick when I eat more. What I like to start with is healing the gut. When you decrease the amount of calories that you're eating over time, what happens is that you allow for your digestive system to slow down. And when it slows down and food sits there longer in your system, bacteria can feed on the food that you're eating and it will start to overgrow. And so you'll have what's called dysbiosis and things like quote unquote leaky gut, which is essentially just intestinal permeability. Now, intestinal permeability just means, and there's 2 to 3 major things that will increase your intestinal permeability. And remember that the main goal of the digestive system is, yes, to give you energy, but also to make sure all the toxins that you eat, like the mold, the bugs, the bacteria, all of that gets very safely and securely stored in the GI tract so that we can excrete it as junk.
Mhm.
When you allow for that junk to get through into seep into your bloodstream, you start having these systemic responses where it's like, the food you ate, and this is where quote unquote food sensitivities come into play, where you're like, I got broccoli flowing through into my brain. That's not right. And the body then responds to these food sensitivities. Of course, that's not how it works. But if we were to break it down as a 5-year-old would, I do like to explain it like that, where it's like, there's this gateway that is being opened, and anything that you put into your system is getting through that gateway. And so, the
Right,
three
right.
major things that will increase that gateway are alcohol, bad gut bugs, so that dysbiosis, if your gut starts to produce more and more of these bad gut bugs because they're being fed on the food that's sitting in your stomach because you're not eating enough and your GI has slowed down, that is also going to increase the intestinal permeability. And then
Mm.
for some people, not for every person, but some people genetically, they may have celiac disease, for example, and they may have intestinal permeability from if they consume gluten.
Is that something that can be developed over time?
Yes.
Yeah, I was just curious. I look at family history. I'm the youngest in the family. Um, I think fitness and health and, looking at your nutrition became big when I was, 10 to 15, and then I started doing it myself at like 20 fully on. If you expose yourself to, a better diet, things that, are helping your whole system work more, efficiently. I feel so good at my age. And not that I'm like a grandpa or anything, but like, you know what I mean? It's like, as at this
Yeah.
point, I'm like, no, I feel really good. I don't feel like I'm 38. And
Yeah. That's
I
great.
think, but like, I wonder about those things for my stomach. I'm like, spicy foods over the years have gotten harder to hold on to. And I'm like, yeah, that's just, I'm not going to have this as much,
Mhm.
but you think about
Do
that. Hey, if I decide to go down that road often, though, I'm gonna probably run into what other people in the family line have.
Absolutely. And there's also something to say. So there's two things that you brought up. And one, and I just want to clarify that there are food sensitivities, which you can
Mhm.
actually heal and you can continue to consume those foods. So a lot of people come to me with like milk or gluten intolerances and they say, I can never have this for the rest of my life. And then we
Yeah.
heal their gut and they're able to tolerate those foods again. And I
Mm.
would very much encourage you to continue eating those foods once you heal your gut because the healthiest gut is the most diverse. So we want to be eating as much as
Mm.
we can in moderation. So if you feel like you have a sensitivity to something, I would say you need to heal your gut and you need to heal that lining in order for you to be able to tolerate that food again. But then there's also the whole celiac, that I'm not going to reintroduce gluten back into your diet, but that goes back to the
Sure.
five speed pillars of us actually, at some point you had so much stress in your life that you turned on that epigenetic marker. And so you'll see this in a lot of bodybuilding competitors where they have
Mm.
those five pillars of stress. We have a lot of stress on the system. We turn on that epigenetic marker. Now you have an autoimmune condition. And now, you are having to do these restrictive diets, perhaps for life. Again, with celiac, you're never going to have gluten again. But if there's two kind of routes. So that's why I say like speed pillars more than anything focus on those foundationally. They will be preventative and then they also will be complementary to your current life. And if you are experiencing any sort of symptoms, really hone in first on your gut health, making sure that, your intestinal barrier is quite strong. There is no dysbiosis. You're not suffering from any of the symptoms like brain fog, fatigue, malabsorption, bowel movement issues, acne, all of these all stem in the gut. Loss of hormones or cycles, like all of that starts in the gut. And then you brought up a really great point about acid reflux and about spicy foods. And I think that has to do a lot with age as well and our esophageal lining. And so
Mm.
making sure that we keep that nice and strong as we age. And that can shift and change too. So people always think that, it's finite. It's like, oh, I'll heal my gut and I'm good for life. Or, I can't tolerate spicy foods and that's what it is for life. And the reality is everything is fluid. You can change
Totally.
both negative symptoms and positive symptoms. And that's why focusing on the five speed pillars just kind of keeps you in that medium. You don't want to be restricting your
Totally.
foods too much. You don't want to be restricting the mindset around like social life with foods. Community, all of those things play into your longevity as well. And I think they're very underrated too. So
Yeah,
throwing
I
in that
love it.
little spiel.
No, no, I love it. I think, and these are things because people go through this stuff. Everyone has had these thoughts or feelings about this, and I think it's so important to talk about it. I do want to talk about menstruation. I would love to hear some advice for young girls who are starting training and they're going to be starting menstruation. That 11, 12, 13, 14-year-old phase, and just some advice for them for nutrition and how to handle that.
I love that. I would say that there's going to be a lot of changes that are happening to your body. And over time, again, going back to those five speed pillars, when you have a really big test at school, that's a stress. And that stress could impact your female cycle. I know when I was going through high school and I would have like an AP bio exam, I would skip my period that month. And it's just a matter of psychological stress that happens. And so your number one goal is just to remember that your hormones are really predicated on your stress levels and your food intake. And I think that people try to overcomplicate it, but it's very, very, very simple. Okay. So you're going to focus on two main systems in the body. So we talked about stress and we talked about actually eating enough calories. But I also want you to focus on your liver. And your liver, you can support with plenty of dark leafy greens, colorful veggies, sulfur rich veggies that'll help with phase two conjugation. I'm probably going over your heads here, but the really big important part here is your liver, because your liver is responsible for conjugating and recycling your estrogen back into the body. Now, that amount is directly related to what's called an estrobolome in your gut. And an estrobolome is a group of gut bacteria in your gut that's also responsible for conjugating and recycling those estrogens. And they work hand in hand very well with your liver. And so the two of these are very, very important for you to just take care of. So, how do you support your gut? Of course, the five speed pillars, of course, those nutrient dense foods. But again, it's eating enough. It's making sure that your digestive system does not slow down because you are dieting for too long. Because again, that is a stress on the system that's feeding those bad gut bugs, and it's going to be a lot harder for you to overcome that in the future. So, eating enough, focusing on your liver, and then also just there's going to be a lot of people who try and sell you hormone supplements. There's going to be a lot of people who try to sell you into cycle syncing your workouts or seed cycling. That is all a scam. The more you become a woman, the more in tune you are with your body. So do not let anyone else tell you how your body feels or functions. And what's most important is for you to know how you feel. So, what I want you to start doing is understanding how you feel on a day that you're tired or on a day that you feel strong. Because I don't need someone on the internet telling you to not work out at your maximum capacity when you feel super strong one day. And just because you're in your follicular phase and you feel really weak doesn't mean that you need to push through it. It means you need to honor your system and your body and your recovery of what you're feeling in that day and in that moment. And this has been evidence based and research based to show that you will actually make more progress if you are in tune with your day to day needs and stressors. So if you push through a really hard workout when you feel like crap, you will actually not make progress at the same speed as someone who took the day off, recovered properly, and then came back into the gym and had a really great session and workout. And so, while there's going to be a lot of people trying to tell you what to do with your hormones, with your body, with whatever else, I want you to stay true to you and I want you to learn your body and your recovery. And that skill set is much, much more important than trying to cycle sync or do any other supplement that is on the internet.
It was great. I love it. I love the passion too. I love it.
Females.
I love it. My wife would be very happy. What is a GLP-1?
GLP-1s are incretins that are released by the body. They're just like we talked about earlier, hormone signals that are released. There's GLP-1, there is GIP, and then glucagon is not an incretin, but it is categorized into the same category with the triple antagonists. So we have the first generation, which is the GLP-1. We have the second generation, which is things like tirzepatide, right? So first generation is Ozempic, second generation is tirzepatide, third generation is the GLP, the GIP, and the glucagon in one. And that's going to be the retatrutide, which is finishing up its clinical trials right now. So I would say majority of people started off with the GLP-1s. They were injectables, now they're oral forms. Those are going to be the ones that are going to slow down your digestive system, basically just make you not hungry, which again, what I just spent the entire podcast telling you about, like do not do this, right? But it will make it easier to diet if you are struggling with that or if you have food noise, which is something that I have utilized at least tirzepatide for my clients who maybe are on there's a lot of like SSRI induced like feelings of like never being full, like food noise beyond, and they're eating well beyond, and in fact, like gaining a lot of weight, even though their insulin is good. Just they have this ravenous hunger because of other
Mhm.
medications that they're on. We see this a lot in a clinical setting with those models, and it's really helpful for that purpose, just to reduce that food noise so that they're not actually in a state of anxiety all day from feeling hunger when their body is actually being fed enough calories.
Yeah. It's wild. I just think about that because it's gotten to the point now where it's in so many realms
Mm,
that, people kidney function is a study
mhm.
for it now. Brain function is a study for it now.
Yeah, the GLPs will affect all of those organ systems slightly. I will say that the newer models, like the retatrutide, is going to have the most potent, most anti-inflammatory effect with the least amount of side effects. And so I would really like look into that, if anything, for anti-inflammation. But we can't
Mm.
forget like shiny object syndrome. Like there are so many anti-inflammatories that are way, way better, that require zero injection, that do not cost you an arm and a leg. And again, going back to the 5 speed pillars, it's like, what can I do with my diet and exercise and my lifestyle to actually prevent me from needing any sort of medication in the first place?
What are some of the low hanging fruits to help inflammation?
The speed pillars, so 7 to 8 hours of sleep, making sure that you're not in any sort of toxic air environment. A lot of people suffer with mold. I've had my own mold journey before. Things to look out for mold, if you think that you
Hmm.
suspect that you might have that, is things like itchiness, hives, you have a lot of histamine reactions, maybe you have really bad
Mm.
GI disturbances, a lot of like neurological symptoms. So you kind of feel like this is really wild, like psychological, like anxieties,
Hmm.
things like that you would see with mold. Then we talk about exercise. So making sure you're getting in 3 to 4 resistance training sessions a week. Things like sauna would be really great. 4 sessions a week, 20 minutes in a dry sauna is what's going to be best. There are studies on infrared, but from my knowledge and from my research, dry sauna is best. It's a little bit higher heat, can help activate the heat shock proteins. Very similar in their benefits. It changes how long you have to be in there based off of the temperature that it is inside. So sweating or sauna is a good one, but remember, as long as you're only this is only beneficial to you if you're recovering from it. If this is, you stacked your sauna with your hardest leg day, with under eating one day, and you didn't sleep, obviously you're not recovering, and obviously that's actually putting digging you deeper into the hole instead of building a tree and building a muscle back up. And then diet, obviously, if you're a female, eating at least 2,200 or 2,300 calories, I would say. Most active women should be between 2,300, 2,600 calories at maintenance, if not more, in a day. And then males, again, I would say 3K and above, especially depending on your size. Men, you have a broader range of the calories, because I feel that you're just able to put on a lot more muscle, so that caloric range can be a lot greater for men. But you're well above and beyond 3,000 calories, even at 160, I would say, pounds.
I
So yeah,
try.
I would say
I try
yeah.
every day.
Yeah, I
I'm
know, it's
I'm
a job. It's a
5'10" and
full-time
a
job.
half, 5'11", 170. I definitely get at least 175 grams of protein a day, that's for sure. And I
Mhm.
definitely get I try it's just hard when you're on the go. I do my best. I
I
do my
hear
best
you.
though.
Yeah, I
But
hear you. I always like to have snacks in the car, snacks in
oh
the
my
in the
god, yeah.
purse.
There
We overcomplicate it, but if we really needed to, we would do it, right? And that's the difference between someone
Yep.
who's driven and someone's not. Like if you
Yeah.
needed, that's the bodybuilder mindset. Like if you needed to hit that 400 carb mark, you're going to pull over, you're going to go grab 2 bananas from the gas station and you're going to eat the bananas. Like it's not,
Yeah.
you're going to
Yeah.
force feed them. But you're
Yeah.
also in a period in your life, and as am I, where it's like I don't really care.
No, that's the thing, like, as just like you said, I have snacks in my backpack, I have snacks in my car, I have snacks, like, in my office. It's just, like,
Yeah.
wherever I need to have my healthy healthy
Dash.
snacks
Yeah.
available, just right there.
For healthy snacks.
I go through phases because I like changing it up, but, like, the jerky sticks, I don't mind those. I normally like the turkey sticks. There's a brand that does chicken stick apple sticks now that are really good. Any kind of fruit I can bring that's on the go. That's like my snacks. I'll do wild chips if I'm having like a craving for chips. At least I know it's not like, a ton of ingredients that aren't great for me. But Typically, I try to stay with mostly natural food as much as I can. It's like you said earlier, though, it's hard when you have a caloric intake that you're trying to get to. It's so hard to get there sometimes without just getting something out of a bag or a box. Like it's not easy.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that one of the things that I would recommend doing is just making sure that you have, like you said, carbs are the hardest for you to hit. And a lot of those snacks that you had mentioned were all protein heavy. So making
Yes, they
sure
were.
that, like, don't be afraid, don't be afraid. And this is for specifically for those female athletes too. And a lot of those
Mm,
athletes that I was talking about, it's like, don't be afraid to have the pretzels on hand or, the chips on hand, the quick recovery kind of snacks. And that's why you see a lot of the top college athletes, like, it's not because they're trying to poison you with these processed goods. It's actually
right.
because it's a lot easier for your body to digest them, and if they can digest them faster, then we can, remember, absorb the nutrients faster, and we can absorb the energy faster. And if we can
Mhm.
absorb the energy faster, we can actually recover faster, and your performance is evidence-based to improve directly from the carbohydrate intake, not fat intake, not protein intake, but carbohydrate intake. And so making sure that we are properly fueling ourselves, and that could be, like I said, like, it could be as easy as, like, having apple juice stacked up and,
Yep.
making sure that you
Yep.
get a swig of that.
Yep.
I always
I
just
do
like
eat
to
a
say,
lot of fruit. I eat a lot of fruit.
yeah, yeah, for athletes, it's like it's just a different game. We don't
Yeah.
have to worry
Yeah.
too much about blood glucose being high. It's actually
True.
blood glucose being low,
It's true.
like
That's true.
we have the opposite problem. And so, yeah, I just like to say, for athletes or people who are active, like I said, 3 to 4 times resistance training a week, like, you are not like general population America. You're not. You are different. And because you are different, your nutrition strategy should look a little different.
I wanna hear about perimenopause and menopause and nutrition and how to best, follow a menu that will help you.
Absolutely. Okay. So we talked about, when, let's go through the whole life cycle, right? So we talked about women who are, or preteens, 13, 14, 15, 16. We talked about eating enough calories, and we
Mhm.
talked about the liver, and we also talked about gut health a little bit. And so the same thing we're going to translate to menopause, because when you're in menopause, it's still super important to be on top of your estrobolome and your liver, because estrogen is still flowing through the system, and we don't want it to be impacted by lack of efficiency in either of those organ systems. So we're still focusing on the liver, we're still focusing on gut health. But now, as we age, our hormones are starting to decline, and we're starting to see maybe some effects in bone health, right? In thyroid health. And I think a lot of coaches and a lot of clients, they think that menopause is any different than just having low cycles or irregular cycles at a younger age. But the reality is, low hormones is low hormones. So the same risks that apply to you in that low hormone state, whether you have relative energy deficiency or have amenorrhea, hypothalamic amenorrhea, you lost your cycle because your body is too stressed from your exercise, from not eating enough, whatever it is, those same risks apply in menopause. The difference is that in menopause, this is happening in a natural state. Your body is declining its hormone function. And so we need to be protecting those organ systems that are still at risk that they were, but now it's just, we can't necessarily control the decline. But what we can do is make sure that those organ systems are supported. So that's going to be your bone, your thyroid, like we talked about, your gut, and then your liver. And so the liver is very important. The gut is very important because your gut is also responsible for your glucose response and your hormone signaling, and a lot of very many, like, neurotransmitters, immune system, all these things are all found in the gut. But the gut is also responsible for blood sugar levels and your insulin responses. And that is going to be very much what you want to focus on in menopause, where you want to make sure that you are not insulin resistant. So I like to see insulin between 2 and 6. Technically, on a lab report, it's not going to be flagged, I think, until it's like, don't quote me on this, but like 19, 29. So you have a long ways to go for it to actually be clinically flagged, which is why it might look normal, but that does not mean it's optimal. So a lot of
Mm,
times working with a
mm.
functional provider is really important, where, I can make sure ahead of time that before you start reverse dieting and eating more calories when you've been chronically under eating, If I can make sure your insulin levels, your gut health is in a good spot, we can prevent you from gaining weight really rapidly. Because a lot of people, they're like, I'm stuck at 1200. If I eat or look at bread, or if I like look at
Uh-huh.
1400 calories, I gain 10 pounds. Those are the people that I always like to get blood work on, check their gut, because usually something is up there. Actually, 90, almost 100% of the time, something's up there.
I do want to myth bust here because we hear so many things about hormones and gut health. So let's myth bust. What's the number one, or maybe one or two things that come up a lot that are
Seed oils.
seed oils? Ooh, this is a hot topic. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about the bad rap that seed oils have gotten and how much inflammation they cause.
Yeah, man, it's crazy. So the whole premise was actually started by a food blogger who had no medical degree background. She kind of just thought of it out of thin air. Yeah, and it was crazy because it took over the internet and spiraled, and now everyone believes that seed oils are bad for you. And they kept making up things that had no clinical background or evidence in the research. In fact, they have done research on it, and they show that when you swap seed oil for someone's diet with like butter, which is what you would traditionally see in someone who's paleo or keto or
Sure.
carnivore who believes that maybe seed oils are bad for them. When they replace seed oils in their exact same diet, the butter, they take it out, they replace it with the seed oil, they actually show improved health markers. They see that their levels of inflammation have gone down. They see that their obviously cholesterol has improved, their triglycerides have improved, their cardiometabolic health has improved. And so it's so silly because you actually look at something like canola oil, and canola oil has way more omega 3s than omega 6s ever. So canola oil is is the largest
Interesting
amount
how
of
that's
omega 3s that you can actually get in oil. And so when you start to
wow.
break down all of these crazy things that people are saying, you actually look at the compound itself. Remember that my background is in biochemistry. I love looking at chemical compounds and how our body's absorbing and digesting them. When you look at the actual compound, you're like, well, that doesn't make sense. Omega 3s are great for you, right? Why are we getting all
Mhm.
of this negative
Mhm.
connotation around it? And like I said, it was started by a food blogger who was just like, everyone's eating seed oils. And the reality is, it's not the seed oils, it's actually high heat cooking. And this is what no one talks about is that grilling, that frying, that's what causes carcinogenic compounds to be formed. It doesn't matter what you use, olive oil, avocado oil,
Right.
doesn't matter
Right.
what
Right.
it is high heat cooking.
Yep.
Nothing
Yep.
else. It's not the red meat, it's the high heat cooking.
Wow, it's funny because in my bio classes that we discussed this, and a grill
Mhm,
situation is actually what we use to talk about this,
mhm.
about the carcinogens being produced because of the high heat, and actually the charcoal and the black stuff that comes off,
Yep.
like, eating that's
That's
probably the
so
worst thing
bad
that
for
you could have,
yes,
even
yes,
though it's
and
delicious, but
it's funny, I saw an influencer once, she posted, she was like, "When I have an upset gut, I eat black toast," and I'm like, "Ma'am, you are telling people to eat carcinogens carcinogens, and telling them not to eat the seed oils," like, that is what blows my mind, and so I think, like, if anything, let's just go back, bring reel us back to reality. The more you kind of hope for the magic thing, it's
Mhm.
everything in moderation. I still eat
Yep.
barbecue, I still eat deli meats, even though they're carcinogenic, like, everything in moderation. The greatest thing that you can do for your body in and your gut is to include the most variety,
Mm,
because nothing is toxic if you only have a little bit of it. It's when someone becomes obsessed with deli meat or
yeah.
some obsessed with something that you're eating it all day every day that it becomes an issue.
I love that. That's funny about the seed oil thing too. Everyone's on that right now. It is important to note though that this is what happens in the fitness and health industry is that something catches fire and then it just gets, thrown out there.
Everyone. Yeah, look
Yeah.
into it. Anyone on the internet, look into it. And now I do want to make this caveat that the reason why I still recommend olive oil over seed oils is because olive oil has a much, 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 much greater and more impactful anti-inflammatory effect because of the polyphenol content and the antioxidants that are involved. And so I am not on here telling you to go eat seed oils. I am simply saying, because in fact, my favorites are still avocado oil and extra virgin olive oil. I am just saying that the fear mongering around seed oils, you know, you eating the seed oil free fried chicken fingers is silly because it's still fried chicken fingers.
We talked about hormones, we talked about gut health. I do want to talk about peptides. What are peptides, and what do they do? What is the main thing we're looking for them to do for us? And do you see them becoming more mainstream?
Peptides are just proteins. So if you think about a carbohydrate, so something like a sweet potato has fructose, it has glucose, and these are all basically monomer or chains of glucose that are stringed together to then form a starch. And so some of them obviously are fructose, but the whole point is that the very single molecule is going to be glucose, and then they form chains to create these complex starches, complex carbohydrates that we see in foods. Okay. So the same thing you can say about protein. Okay. So you see something like chicken on the market, and that is going to be your protein. When we break it down into its most basic form, we have things like BCAs, right? The actual
Mhm.
amino acids themselves. We have leucine, we have isoleucine, we have valine. I mean, there's many of them. Now, those amino acids, when they link together and form a chain, when they form a small chain, that's called a peptide. When they form a longer chain, that's called a protein. So, peptides are simply just a smaller version of proteins, of digested proteins, you could say. And so we've had peptides on the market for a very long time, things like insulin. We've had a lot of different various forms of peptides. The main form and mechanism of action by how they work, because you have to remember that they have a very short half life. Just like when
Mm.
when you eat a sugar, they're very instantaneous. We absorb them very quickly. The same thing with a peptide. We absorb them very quickly. And so the way that they work is that they actually, when we absorb them quickly, they trigger a further chain reaction. And that chain reaction is what we're actually seeing the benefit from. So we don't need it to be actively working in our bodies for 24, 48 hours, but we do need it to trigger that response. Okay. And so that's why you'll see a lot of people, either they will take days off, they will cycle their peptides, or maybe they'll have injections just once a week. That's how and why people are able to do that, even though it is a smaller compound that is absorbed quite quickly. So when we think about, like, do I believe that peptides are going to be the future of pharmaceutical drugs? No, they're not the future of pharmaceutical drugs. Pharmaceutical drugs are way better and more potent, but I do think that they will be more prominent, and I think that they will play a larger role in the future, where, we'll see supplements, and then we'll see peptides, and then we'll see pharmaceutical drugs. So that's kind of the hierarchy that I see happening. Whereas right now we just have supplements or pharmaceutical drugs. I think peptides will just work in the middleman ground there.
In my experience, it feels like I've heard more things about recovery aid and regeneration from, let's say, an injury, or in between games for athletes having more peptides. So, like, what are people actually trying to get out of that?
For recovery specifically?
Yeah, I
Oh, yeah. So I like to use it in that case. Like, BPC is a great one, specifically injecting it into areas that tend to have a lot of inflammation. So a really great use case for this, for example, would be if you were my former roommate a couple years ago was training for a marathon. He has never run in his life, but he's quite tall and quite large, like a hefty man. And he was
mhm.
like, my knees cannot handle this running. So he started taking BPC. Now he can recover. His knees don't flare up. He can actually run and recover properly. And he can succeed in achieving the marathon. So a use case like that, where it's very acute, it's a one-time thing. You're not going to be using it for the rest of your life, but he just needs something to get him through that marathon training. That's a really
Sure.
great use case for it. Or you just had surgery and you're trying to very acutely, for one time, recover faster. Those are going to be your use cases for it. I think the ones that are like, people are taking it for like gut health, which you absolutely can. But again, there are so many other things that can be really more beneficial that won't cost you $200 a month.
Like the 5 pillars.
Yes.
I want to talk about the core coaching, and I want to talk about core perform.
The main differences is just we offer one-on-one coaching. So if you want help for yourself for running blood work, for running stool tests, for really getting one-on-one support for whatever you're going through, that would be Core Perform. You can reach out to me at Dasha Fitness. And then what I was going to say was if you are a coach and you wanted mentorship, then I do have certifications all going into whether it be gut health, hormone health, or advanced techniques. So things like exchange plans, putting together nutrition plans, peptides, menopause, bone health protocols, pregnancy from, breastfeeding to postpartum, insulin reset protocols, things like that. That's all that we dive into in the mentorships and the certifications. And those are accredited by the Academy of Dietetics. So if you are a dietitian as well, you will get over 90 CEUs for those. So yeah, whether you're a coach and you want to
Nice.
learn from us or you are a client and you want to work with us, more than happy to help in any way I can.
Awesome. Well, you left us with a fountain of knowledge today. It was awesome. Picked up so many different things. So if anyone wants to reach out, you guys have the information there. I'll have it in the show notes as well. Dasha, thank you so much for joining today. I learned, you made me smarter today. So thank you so much.
Of course, I love it. Always trying to learn one new thing a day. And if anyone wants freebies and to learn more, I have a bunch of resources on my Instagram. When you head to my Instagram, it's pinned to the top. You just comment freebies and it'll give you like a long list that you can then choose from of whatever you want to learn more about.
Oh, that's awesome. I'll check it out too.
Awesome. All right. It was great. Thank you
Thanks,
so much for
Dasha.
having me.
Absolutely. Thanks for listening to the Coach U podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, share the episode, and we'll catch you on the next one.